The CEO had learned how to read balance sheets, markets, and people in meetings, but there was one thing she had never truly learned to read: silence. That silence was what caught her attention that evening, when most employees had already left, and the building echoed with emptiness. As she gathered her things, she noticed the janitor, a single father she had seen countless times but never really noticed, quietly finishing his work. There was something about the way he moved, focused, careful, almost invisible, that made her pause. On impulse she couldn't explain, she decided to follow him after work. He didn't notice her at first. He clocked out, adjusted his worn jacket, and stepped into the fading light of the parking lot. She stayed back, feeling slightly ridiculous, slightly curious, and strangely alert. This wasn't a boardroom decision. This wasn't strategy. This was instinct. She had always believed success came from data, but that night something told her there was a story behind this man that no report had ever captured. He didn't go home right away. Instead, he walked several blocks to a small grocery store, carefully comparing prices, counting bills before choosing what to buy. She watched from a distance as he picked the cheapest items, putting one thing back after another with quiet discipline. In that moment, the CEO felt something uncomfortable: recognition, not of poverty but of responsibility. Every decision he made carried weight. Someone depended on him. When he finally reached his apartment building, it wasn't impressive. It was old, dimly lit, and tired. She watched as he paused at the door, taking a breath before going inside, as if preparing himself to become someone else. Through a window, she saw a small child run toward him, arms wide, joy instant and unconditional. The man knelt, dropped his bag, and held that child like nothing else in the world mattered. The CEO felt her throat tighten. She had closed billion-dollar deals without flinching, but this cracked something open. She realized how many evenings she had gone home to silence, mistaking it for freedom. How many relationships she had postponed for later. And here was a man with almost nothing, yet clearly carrying everything that mattered. Days passed, but she couldn't forget what she had seen. Back at work, she watched him differently. She noticed how he cleaned offices with the same care others reserved for their own homes. How he avoided complaints. How he smiled politely but never lingered. She began to wonder how many people like him existed inside her company, holding it together quietly, unseen, unrewarded. One afternoon, she called him into her office. He stood stiffly, nervous but respectful, clearly expecting trouble. She surprised him by asking about his life, not his work. At first, he answered carefully, guarded by years of being overlooked. But slowly he spoke, about losing his partner, about raising his child alone, about working nights so mornings could belong to homework and breakfast and laughter. She listened without interrupting. No phone, no assistant, just attention. And in that space, something shifted. She realized leadership wasn't about being followed, it was about seeing, truly seeing, and she had failed at that for far too long. The changes didn't come loudly. They came quietly: flexible hours, better pay, support programs no one had thought necessary until now. She didn't announce them as charity. She framed them as respect. And something remarkable happened. The company culture changed. Productivity rose. Loyalty deepened. People felt human again. But the biggest change was in her. She started leaving work earlier. She started asking questions that didn't fit on spreadsheets. She started understanding that success without connection feels hollow. Watching that janitor walk out every evening with dignity had taught her more than any executive seminar ever had. One evening she ran into him again as he was leaving. This time she didn't follow. She walked beside him. They spoke like equals, not CEO and janitor, just two people shaped by responsibility in different ways. He thanked her not for the changes but for seeing him. That thank you stayed with her longer than any award ever had. At home that night, she stood alone in her apartment and understood something powerful. The measure of a company isn't profit alone. The measure of a life isn't titles. It's the quiet impact we have on people who may never make headlines, but carry the world on their shoulders. The next morning she shared his story, Not his name, not his struggles, but his strength. And for the first time, the company felt like a community. People stayed late, not because they had to, but because they wanted to be part of something that finally felt meaningful. If you're watching this and you've made it this far, ask yourself this: how many people do you pass every day without really seeing them? And how much could change if you did? Stories like this don't ask for sympathy. They ask for awareness. And if this story moved you, don't just scroll away. Watch till the end, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and share this video, because sometimes the quietest lives teach the loudest lessons. After that quiet transformation inside the company, something unexpected happened outside its walls. Word began to spread, not through press releases or social media posts, but through people. Employees talked to their families. Families talked to friends. And slowly, the company developed a reputation it had never actively tried to build. A place where people mattered. The CEO watched this unfold with a mix of pride and humility, realizing that one small act of attention had set off a chain reaction she could never have engineered on purpose. The single father noticed the changes too, but he didn't let them change him. He still arrived early, still worked carefully, still walked home thinking about dinner, homework, and bedtime stories. But there was a difference now. He walked with less tension in his shoulders, less fear about tomorrow. Stability, he had learned, isn't about having more. It's about worrying less. And for the first time in years, he felt the ground beneath his feet wasn't constantly shifting. One evening, as the CEO was leaving the building, she saw him waiting near the entrance, not for her, but for his child. The school had organized a small open house event nearby, and the child had insisted on seeing where their father worked. Watching them together, hands clasped, laughter easy, she felt a quiet ache. Not jealousy, not regret, just awareness. A clear understanding of what she had postponed in her own life again and again. They spoke briefly that night. Nothing heavy, just ordinary conversation. And yet in that ordinariness, something profound existed. The child looked at the CEO without knowing who she was, judging her only by tone and kindness. Children, she realized, are the most honest judges of character. Titles mean nothing to them. Presence means everything. That night she made a decision that surprised even herself. She declined a late meeting the following week, something she had never done before. Instead, she signed up to mentor young professionals from difficult backgrounds, not as a public gesture but as a personal responsibility. She understood now that leadership didn't end at the office door. It followed you home. It followed you into your choices. Meanwhile, the father faced a challenge of his own. His child struggled at school, overwhelmed and anxious. In the past, he would have handled it alone, quietly. But this time, he asked for help. The company's new support programs connected him with resources he never knew existed. And in asking, he discovered something important. Strength isn't silence. Strength is knowing when to speak. Weeks turned into months. The company grew not just in numbers but in trust. People stayed. Turnover dropped. Productivity rose, but more importantly, morale did. And all of it traced back to one moment of curiosity, one decision to follow instead of ignore. One afternoon, during a company gathering, the CEO told a story. She didn't name him. She didn't reveal details. She simply spoke about a person who taught her what real responsibility looks like. The room was silent, not because she was powerful, but because she was honest. And honesty, when it's rare, commands attention. The father listened from the back of the room, uncomfortable but proud. He didn't need recognition. He never had. What mattered was that his child would grow up in a world where effort was seen, where dignity wasn't tied to job titles. And for the first time, he felt hopeful not just for himself, but for the future his child would inherit. Late that evening, the CEO returned to her apartment, but this time the silence didn't feel empty. It felt intentional. She sat with her thoughts, understanding that her life wasn't lacking success. It had been lacking balance. And balance, she now knew, was something you had to choose every day. If you're still watching this story, there's a reason. Because somewhere in it, there's a reflection of your own life, someone you overlooked, something you postponed, a moment you felt but didn't act on. Stories like this aren't about heroes. They're about awareness. And before this video ends, take a moment. If this story made you feel something, don't leave quietly. Subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and share this video, because the smallest decisions can change everything, and you never know who might be watching or who might finally feel seen.